So what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to read. What I'm going to do this week is I'm going to read these, and I'm going to see how you guys did, and see if you picked up on some cues and things that they might have been saying or not saying, as the case may be, and see if we've actually done a good job of listening. So that'll be good. It'll be good. There's one other announcement I was going to make. Should have written it down. What was I going to say? That might be it. I might as well announce that. In 2 weeks, I will not be here. My wife will not be here. But you will still have Sunday school. Austin Reed and Don Alba are going to be teaching it. Okay? And they have plenty of time to get ready. I just gave them the material today. But I asked them, what was it? I asked 2 months ago, right, if you guys would do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was before the class started.
Before the class.
All right, and this is our 8th week.
Right.
So 2 months ago. So, but they'll be ready. They're going to actually talk about deism, because after today, we're going to launch into a whole new brand of apologetics. Because what we've talked about at this point is non-theistic apologetics. People that might not assume that there is a God. Well, then there's a whole world of apologetics called theistic apologetics that presuppose, they will at least give you the idea that God could exist. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of things we need to learn about those guys. And there are those that are deists, and they are pantheists and panentheists, and so we're going to learn a whole bunch of more stuff. And again, not that they would necessarily call themselves that, but we need to learn that when they say certain things, if we can listen and hear, when we do then, we understand how to respond. Make sure we got that right? Okay, and that's good. We ought to pray, since we just made Austin lose about 3 years of his life. But it's good. It is good. Dennis, you want to put us in prayer, please? That would be great. Thank you.
Dear Lord, we just want to come before you today. Thank you for the time together. Thank you for the awesome weather you've given us this weekend. Lord, just we get ready to engage today, just open our minds, our ears, and our hearts so that we might hear and learn and be able to take this from this place forward as well. And Lord, just honor Doug at his time and just be with him as he is prepared diligently today and for his sermon today as well. Just lift that up to you. It's in your name we pray.
Amen. Thank you, Dennis. All right, just a quick review, and I mean quick. So when we started, we talked about getting into this canoe ride, right? So it's a relational connection that we make so that you and I can make a thoughtful and rational response in defense of our faith. So if we're making a canoe trip and doing a relational kind of connection with someone, we've done those 4 preparations that we talked about, and now we've been talking about methodologies, or what we call pathways to knowledge. There are people that believe different things, and they believe that what they believe is true. And so if they're true, then our job is just to put a pebble in their shoe to see if they will honestly give themselves some thought to think that maybe they might not believe what is true. All right? So if we're talking to an agnostic who is a strong agnostic, what is one question we can ask? Apparently you guys don't like the chairs I've already set up. Is that the idea? There's 5 comfy chairs right now.
The front row is a split section.
Maybe it's is that splash zone? Is that what I hear?
Splash zone. Split section.
Andy, what's one question?
If we cannot know God, isn't that at least one thing we can can know about now.
That is right. So he is unknowable. So if we get them to be a weak agnostic, what's a question we ask a weak agnostic?
Would you be willing to look at some evidence?
Thank you. Would you be willing to look at some evidence that proves that God does exist? So that's agnosticism. Then we talked about rationalism. What's one question we can ask of rationalism?
How hot do you think it'll be in hell?
Might not be a question you would ask. Okay? Depends on the relationship you have with them, maybe. So Matt's obviously in a canoe trip and has been in it for 10 years. So that he knows the person really well. All right? What's a question we can ask of a rationalist?
What if it doesn't make sense to me?
All right, good. And it goes back to, right, because to them, to a rationalist, if it makes sense, it has to be true, right? So the question is, well, wait a minute, what if it doesn't make sense to me? And what if what I believe doesn't make sense to you, then who's right? All right, what about an experientialist? What's one question we can ask to an experientialist? Yeah.
What if someone has a different experience than you've had, which leads them to a different belief?
Exactly right. And then how do we know which one is true? Right? Very similar. All right. What else did we cover? Fideism. Thank you. Fido is the dog. But we can call it Fidoism if we want to. I like it. No, but you're good. So what does a fideist believe?
Faith alone.
Simply by faith alone, right? Whatever I believe by faith. And that's my pathway to knowledge and truth. So what's a question I can ask a fideist?
Is it possible that faith can prove anything, I believe?
Good question. Is it possible that faith can prove anything? And the answer is absolutely. So then what's the standard for truth? If it's just your faith, well then what if your faith isn't, right? And what if your experience is, right? So we're talking about experientialism. Your faith, just like experientialism, is your experiences. It's very limited, right? It might not lead to a place of truth. Good. So now we've launched into evidentialism. So those people that are evidentialists, and if you remember last week, we didn't get all the way through this, we introduced it. By definition, evidentialism is the position that makes evidence the test for truth. Okay? So in other words, they believe that only what is true is what is provable. So they are looking for evidence. Now, is evidence bad? No, it's actually good. Okay? Where they fall short is, and you remember we did this. These are just raw facts, right? That's the evidence. But evidence needs an interpretation. So people who are evidentialists might just give you the raw facts, but they need to be interpreted. Now, sometimes we can interpret them this way. Sometimes we can interpret them that way. So you understand that to an evidentialist, they're just going to look at the raw facts, but that's not enough. Right? And we'll look at that in just a minute and how that is true and some of the difficulties with that. Evidence and the facts, right? We said this underneath our response. This is A. Evidence does not carry its own interpretation. Right? What can facts prove?
Themselves.
Themselves. That's it. Right? They need to be interpreted. Now, a lot of people produce a lot of facts. And I'll give you some in a minute. Well, matter of fact, I'll give you one now. I heard this on the news. All right? You'll understand. Please understand. I am not saying that I'm entering the political arena here, but I heard Democrats touting the fact that gas prices are down. The great news! Gas prices are down! It's now under $4 a gallon. All right? See, here's the raw facts. Gas prices are down. You can't refute that. But we need to interpret it.
You can't refute that a couple years ago it was $1.67.
See? Because that's also a fact. So what they're doing is they're interpreting it this way, and they're saying it's a win. Now, you understand, in a lot of political campaigns, that's what they do. They'll give you facts, but they'll interpret it this way. And what about this interpretation? What about the facts that say, oh yeah, well when Trump left office it was $1.89 on average? Oh, swallow your tongue. We don't want to hear that fact. So you understand that facts by themselves are just facts. They need to be interpreted. Does that make sense? You with me? So that's A. B then, facts have meaning only with worldviews. And I'm starting to erase stuff. You remember that circular reasoning, 2 statements I put on the board last week? The reality is, the facts only have meaning if I'm going to apply my worldview. So if I believe that, man, our country's in a great position now because gas prices are down, see, that means that I'm a Democrat. So my worldview affects how I see the facts, right? Republicans hear that same thing and they go, but you're an idiot. Okay? Because you see how these are different. They're opposed. So, wait, erase that on the tape.
Oh, I think we should make it nationwide.
All right? So listen, when you and I have a worldview, that's how we interpret the facts. That's why you will have all kinds of people saying all kinds of things about the same facts. Right? They'll be talking about the same things, but they'll be interpreting it 2 totally different ways. Are you with me there? All right, so if I'm thinking in my head, evidence by itself doesn't carry its own interpretation. They're just facts. Secondly, or B, facts only have meaning with the worldview. C, then, there are 2 implications. You see, it's our worldview that determines the selection of what I think is meaningful. If I look at the evidence, and I just look at the raw facts, now that I'm a Christian, I have a Christian worldview. And now all of a sudden these facts take on certain meanings because of what I believe. Does that make sense? You with me? So that's where these facts begin to have punch. Now, here's the problem at this point, obviously. The person I'm in the canoe with might not have the same worldview as I do. Okay? They might produce a whole bunch more evidence, but they're looking at it this way, and we might be looking at it this way. And we'll give you a way to talk about them in a minute. Yeah?
I was just gonna ask, doesn't worldview also, like someone's worldview also generates, it doesn't just affect how we interpret facts, it also generates a lot of facts? I shouldn't say the worldview generates the facts, but like we as Christians, our worldview is that God exists is a fact. Jesus was his son is a fact. He rose from the dead is a fact. Those facts come out of our worldview. That's not just that our worldview interprets those.
Yeah. These are the raw facts. As Christians, this is the way we link the facts. Someone outside of Christ might link them this way. So, as Christians, we say Jesus was the Son of God. So it links these 2. There's another belief system that says, yeah, he really wasn't the Son of God. He was a Son of God, just like you and I. Because we are considered sons of God. So he's just one of them. So they'll interpret that fact differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But now we know that's how we listen and we contrive questions to ask about some of those facts and the evidence that they say is linked differently. Does that make sense, Andy?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily change the facts, because facts are just facts, right? But now how we interpret them. So,
Don't all these pieces, and I add to it or subtract to it or whatever, but to me, every single one of these is, that person's coming from a benchmark, whatever they're using for a benchmark.
yeah.
And to me, our benchmark is the scripture. So if they're coming from a different benchmark, not that you tell them their benchmark is wrong, that's been obvious, that's not the approach.
Right.
But you need, for them to see what we're seeing, they need a different benchmark, do they not?
Right. Which is why, as we're going down the canoe trip, what's the first mile marker?
Truth.
Truth.
That's the benchmark, isn't it?
Exactly. See, and that's why, if we really don't know what they're thinking and what their benchmark is, that's what the canoe trip is for. Because the first mile marker, if you want to call it a mile marker or first benchmark, is truth. We want to be able to lead them to truth. But these pathways to knowledge have to be understood, because why don't they understand what you and I understand? Because you and I believe it, we say because it's true. Well, that's what they would say. Well, then what's our foundation for that? What's our basis? Ours is the Word of God, right? They might say, so is ours, because the raw facts are this, right? And that's why, for instance, a Mormon might use the same Bible and use same verses, but boy, they interpret it this way. Are you with me there? They don't?
They have two wives. Everything gets confusing.
Well, but they can use Old Testament verses to do that, right?
They're being told how to think for two different directions.
And the same with, and that's why this isn't a class just how to talk to Mormons or how to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses. Because there's a way to interpret these facts that have to be understood. But great question, absolutely right on. Let me see, was that C? Yeah. Our worldview determines, one, the selection of these and the relationship that these facts will have to one another. D, evidence is not self-interpreting. What's that, man?
I missed 2
I
and 3
missed
of
2
that.
and 3.
I only got 1 under C. You have 3 under C. 1, 2, and 3. That's all right.
Yeah, I don't have.
You did 3.
He's doing this.
He's doing it really fast.
I know, we only have 1. You didn't really tell us what 2
Wait,
is.
3 is our response.
It says
Our
Ellis.
response.
Our response.
We have A, B, C, and
A.
then we have 1, 2, 3 under C.
Yeah, one under C.
Yeah.
The selection, oh, I didn't.
We have that. We have 1.
All right, you got 2?
No.
2, the relationship between the facts. That's what this is. The relationship between the facts. Right? Sorry. And then this is the illustration number 3. All right.
It's number one. And Gina doesn't.
So,
I have it all.
so, all right, so listen, this is just catch up from last week, okay? I didn't think we were, this is catch up from last week, okay? All right, so D, okay. D, evidence is not self-interpreting, all right? And that's where a lot of people will just give you the facts, and then they'll say, see, that's the facts. For instance, Christians say, see, because one of the things that, someone said over here, or as Andy said, right? They'll say, Jesus is the Son of God. That's a fact. Okay, how do we interpret that? Because someone else is going to interpret it differently. So that's the raw fact. But we have to do something with it. So D is saying evidence is not self-interpreting. Okay? Let me give you an example. Gas prices are down. If I just made that statement, could you refute it? No, because gas prices are down.
Sure. Short term. Right.
right?
Down
What?
from what? It's a data point.
But what I'm saying is, if I make that statement, it's the raw facts.
Yeah, but that's called, so we argue about this, that's called slicing the data. So basically you're saying, these are only 2 data points, where it was 2 weeks ago and where it is now. You're not looking at the full data set. It's called slicing the data to make a better narrative or a better point of view.
And that's what people do in their belief of God, right? And that's what evidence, right? These raw facts are not self-interpreting. Jesus is the Son of God. That's not self-interpreting. We have to help them understand it and why that's true. Okay? We could get to a whole bunch of examples, but again, if people say, well, you know, listen, gas prices are down, so the economy's great.
Figures never lie, but liars figure.
Right? And listen, and especially during this time of all of these political campaigns, because of these midterms coming up, you'll have TV commercials. If you listen to one, and then 30 seconds later you listen to a second one, you're going to listen to 2 messiahs. And you're going, what? And they're doing the same thing. They're giving you figures, and they're saying, see, that's the truth. But they need to be interpreted. So there's a story behind the fact. There's evidence behind the fact. They can tell you gas prices are down, and then they make a statement, so the economy's great.
But did they approve this message? That's what you gotta listen.
Hey, side note here, just so that you guys know, Mike let me know, for those of you sitting near the back, just know that if you guys whisper to one another, that camera picks up on it. You guys are going to be heard.
So if you say something bad about Doug back here, you want to know?
You might want to start the takeover.
I forgot to say that at the beginning, because Mike said he listened to one this week, and he said, yeah, you can hear people in the back. So he picked up on something that Dom said, and he goes, we'll see if he repents of that later. Probably not. Yeah. All right. So, evidence is not self-interpreting. A, there's our examples. B, and this was, remember, we looked at this circular reasoning. We put 2 comments, right? The one at the top was our worldview shapes the evidence, and then the other one is evidence shapes our worldview. And that's circular reasoning, because there are times that even we as Christians, we take the raw facts and we just, boom, here it is. And we give them the facts, and we think that the facts are self-interpreting, so we go, there you go. Well, there you go what? Well, Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, what about that? Well, that just proves that that's true. See, that's when we have to be careful, because now we're thinking, so our thinking, our worldview, our Christian view shapes what we say are the facts, right? And we see, as a Christian, that's the way that the facts are arranged. But there's someone who doesn't believe in Christ who sees the facts this way. Our job is to get them to see it this way. Are you with me there? So it's not like we're trying to disprove the facts. Facts are good. Facts are great. But facts by themselves need to be interpreted. We have to give them a reason to see the facts this way. Are you with me there? Yes? Okay. Someone had their hand up? Okay. Now, here are questions. Again, some of these are phrased one way. You can phrase them a million different ways, but this is the first question. Isn't it true that some things that were once believed to be true have been proven false? To an evidentialist, they struggle to answer that. Right? You guys have an example of something that was once believed to be true but has been proven false.
Russian collusion or Hunter's laptop maybe?
Okay. If you want to go political, you can do that. Yeah, what's that?
Please, they're now saying T-Rexes have feathers.
Oh. T-Rexes had feathers. How about that? Yeah, how about that? Listen, there's a lot of examples here, right?
Well, even the ark, it was supposed to have been, you know, a myth, but isn't there parts of it now supposed to be in some?
Supposedly. Listen, how long did everyone believe that the earth was flat?
What?
Right? You mean what? Yeah. Listen, it was widely accepted that the earth was flat. But it has since been proven to be false. So a great question is, isn't it true that some things that were once believed to be true have been proven false? Now, obviously, if they say yes, and they have to believe it because you can give them worlds of examples, a follow-up question, are there things that have been proven true by using evidence that have since been proven to be false?
Wow.
Now, that's a long way of asking the same question. Because if you're listening to people and you're listening to them and what you're listening to leads you to believe that they're an evidentialist, then maybe the second way to word that question would be better. Aren't there those things that have had good evidence that have since been proven false? Now, to someone who is an evidentialist, now keep in mind, I think you had a great point last week, they might not label themselves this way, but as we're listening to them, we realize that they're an evidentialist. Then we ask, hasn't there been those things in the past that had lots of evidence but have since been proven to be false? Now, be ready to share, which by the way, here are some. I just wrote down some. And these kind of rocked my world a little bit. Because I was always led to believe that cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Did you guys believe that?
Yeah.
That's what my parents told us.
Yeah. But that is not medical proof, right?
Nuns cracking your knuckles will cause arthritis.
Knuckleheads will cause it. Yeah. It's a fallacy. Yet, how many of us were led to believe that cracking your knuckles would lead you to arthritis? How many of you believed that bats were blind? Have you ever heard the statement, man, you're as blind as a bat?
Oh, yeah.
We believe, we have been actually taught people, yeah, they just use their sonar. And that's true. But the truth is there are some bats that have 3 times the power of vision than humans do. So it's been proven wrong. Let me see, are there any others I wrote down? Here's another one. Have you ever been led to believe that alcohol warms you up? And Jeff goes, that's why I drank, doggone that.
When you find it's like I just pictured a flashback.
Oh, gotcha. But that was a common fallacy, but it's been debunked, okay? Alcohol doesn't warm you up. Matter of fact, if you drink enough of it, it actually does the opposite. So, listen, all I'm saying is just know those things, because when you ask the question, aren't there things that have had evidence in the past proven to be false?
Mount St. Helens, the volcano. You know, everybody used to think that it was millions of years for fossils and for coal. And then the explosion at Mount St. Helens, it happened. And
Carbon dating.
yeah.
Yeah, listen, you can go to the whole carbon dating. Carbon dating has been proven to be false thousands of times. So you get the idea. Here's a second question. B, can't evidence prove anything without a correct interpretation? If I just have raw facts, I can prove anything. I can prove the economy is good because gas prices are down. You're like, wow, really?
Not anyone here.
Yeah.
Actually, might say the economy is great because it's up.
Wait,
That's
say that
what
again.
has been said.
Bill, I can.
Prices are up because the economy is so good.
Yeah, but think about how they arrange the facts.
It's not
Yeah.
true, it's a mistake.
The whole question here is exactly right. It all hinges on worldview.
It does.
It truly does. Like Matt's saying, for some group of people, they want gas prices even higher.
Yeah.
Because that should cut away the use of fossil fuels, which helps the world.
Yeah.
So if we can get rid of it all, in their viewpoints.
And there are people that will say battery operated cars, that's the greatest thing you can do. Until you read
Yeah, what it-
how much damage those batteries, because they emit. Have you ever seen a battery ever not leak? Listen, those big batteries in those cars leak. And do you realize how big they are? To power a car, you need a 300-pound battery. That battery's gonna leak. What do you think it's gonna leak into the ozone? It's damaging. It is far worse than a gas-powered car.
They also have a tendency to explode.
It's awesome. Yeah. So, but listen, so you get the idea, right? So the question is, can evidence prove anything without a correct interpretation? And the obvious answer is yes. The third question, C. Is it then possible, and again, these are consecutive questions. Is it then possible that there are things we believe to be true today that might be proven false tomorrow? Now listen, that's going to set you up as a Christian.
Pre, post, and mid.
Right? They're going to come back with questions. Oh yeah, well listen, let me ask you about this your Christianity, right? Because there are things that we say as Christians. Oh yeah? You say there's a heaven and a hell, prove it. Are you ready? Because we're going to say there is a heaven and a hell. And we're going to say, yeah, it's absolutely true. How do you know that? And we're going to say, well, it's in the Bible. Oh, so you believe it by faith. Because have you ever seen it? Have you ever been there? Now listen, to an evidentialist, we are nothing more than fideists. We believe it because we believe it by faith. Now we talked about, you understand, we have to walk by faith, right? We are saved by faith. We can't please God without faith. And so we recognize that faith is necessary. And so, to an evidentialist, we are nothing more than fideists. Okay? So that's the way they're going to view us, because be ready. They might say things like, oh yeah, well you believe in heaven. Yes, I do. Have you ever been there?
It's all about the experience. One person might drive a van to school one day, and their experience might be hard, but everybody else might experience joy from that. So.
They might. There are people who are on a roller coaster ride and think it's the greatest thing in the whole world. But don't ask my wife about the experience she had on the Maverick. Right? Which, by the way, did you know that Cedar Point now, the Maverick at Cedar Point is the best roller coaster in the United States? I heard that on the news this week. I don't know how they did that study, but it proved somehow in this study the Maverick was the #1 roller coaster in the United States. Now, ask my wife if it's the #1 roller coaster, and you would say...
I would say, don't use me as an example.
I didn't ask you to explain, I just asked you to give me a yes or no. Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer.
So she just ruined my illustration. I think my wife would say no. Leave it there. Yeah.
You mentioned how, like, evidentialists would look at us as fideists because we believe by faith. Ultimately, any and all of these worldviews require some measure of faith. Even an evidentialist. Like, they believe that the world is a sphere.
They are not going to say that, though. Right? They will say that based on their interpretation. See, they will say, we have pictures from space to believe that the earth is round. It's no longer flat. See, they will say, we have evidence.
They didn't take the picture, so they are exercising faith that that's a real
They are.
picture.
But
they won't admit that that's
Now keep in mind, remember back when we talked about getting into the canoe, right? As we go from checkpoint 1 to 2, when we go from truth, and then we start talking about God, right? There is a level of probability that we have to deal with. Remember we talked about that. Christians have the best level of probability. So keep in mind, yeah, I might not say it that way to an evidentialist. I might not say, hey, you're operating by faith. Oh man, you're going to cause all kinds of hives to jump out on this evidentialist, right? Because they want to believe that everything they believe is provable.
So I was born in the wrong body, so now I'm the wrong gender.
Yeah.
So what are the raw facts of that?
Yeah, see, and they will say things like this. We say, no, the DNA proves that you're a female. Because you have an XX or an XY.
Derek?
You might want to cross that.
Clarify that's just an example for him.
He said he feels like.
He's singing us tonight.
Well, listen, but that's correct, right? Because we can say, listen, the raw facts are, see, and we can say the raw facts are, you're either a boy or you're a girl. How many genders are there? There's 2, right? Can we believe it? Now, I've heard someone say there's up to 7,000 genders. You get the idea. That's how they interpret these facts. Because they say that it's a fact that you're allowed to feel how you want. Right? Listen, we could go into a lot of that. We'll get into like that the last 2 weeks of our class. We'll get into a lot of those situational current structure things. All right, where was I? C, how about D? The last one. Would you be willing to look at some evidences along with their interpretations about the existence of God? Okay? So now what you're asking them to do is, if there's a possibility, and that's where the first 2 questions, if there is a possibility that there are things that have been proven false that had evidence, would you be willing to look at some of the evidence and the interpretation, this interpretation, that there is a God? You with me there? Any questions about that? All right, let's go then to pragmatism. Now this one is probably more common because this one has American roots, okay? This is United States born. You will find this in the United States more common than the rest of the globe. Definition, and it's simple. What works is true. Okay? What works is true. Pragmatism is very results-oriented. If I can show you that this plus this equals that, it must be true. It's very pragmatic. It's very practical. We say that pragmatists are interested in fruits, not roots. So, an approach to truth, this is a pathway to knowledge that really addresses the problems practically and logically. So they don't have any problem with logic. A pragmatist and a rationalist get along great. A pragmatist is usually straightforward and matter of fact and doesn't let emotion get the best of him.
I like this one.
Okay? Yeah. And anyone who has SDI red would understand this guy. Okay? Very straightforward, matter of fact, and doesn't care about your feelings. Because this is what works whether you like it or not. Right? If I'm in baseball and I realize I'm a left-handed batter, that means my right hand's on the bottom of the bat, the left hand's on top of my right one, right? And someone says, but I can hit better this way. And then they go up and do it. And their batting average goes up 50 points. Then I go, by golly, they're right. Now, it very well could be that their eyeballs are backwards and they're seeing You understand? But to them, they're going, but who cares? I'm batting 50 points higher.
There you go.
Does that make sense? That's a pragmatist. All right. 2, the roots of pragmatism. All right. What's that?
He needs to go to Alpha. He's a pragmatist.
I'm going to tell you an experience I had with one just a few months ago. Roots of pragmatism, there's 2 guys, Charles Peirce and William James. You don't need to know that.
No.
That won't be on the final exam. But I wanted you to at least hear it. Because here's what these guys have said that have made a big impact. Both of them are American. Charles Peirce talked about 4 methods that lead to truth, and they're all pragmatic. The first one he called tenacity. Simply put, he refused to look at anything else while holding light of your belief, because it works for me. So you hear how, right, it's subjective. Listen, it works for me. I don't really care what you believe. What I believe works. Now listen, that's dangerous even as a Christian, because I've heard too many Christians say that. We have to be careful not to be Christian pragmatists. Because it's going to be, I really don't care what the Bible says, I really don't care what you say. It works for me. Guys, be careful. A second method that Charles Peirce talked about, and we call this just a simple word, authority. And to a pragmatist, they don't have any problem trusting in an institution or a person to tell them what to believe. Listen, I'm not slamming the Catholics here, but isn't it true that Catholics believe the Pope just because he's the Pope? That's a dangerous thing, especially if what the Pope says violates the truth of Scripture. So there's this issue of authority, yeah.
That could be said of any denomination or any pastor even, that leads someone incorrectly through a statement that's not backed up by the truth of the Bible.
Exactly right.
Was it Ukraine of Nazis?
Listen, you can go all the way across the board. Any leader, right? But that's one of the tendencies of a pragmatist. They will quote a person in authority and say, see, it works for them, so it has to be true. Whether it's in politics, whether it's in religion, secular business, right? We can quote, what's his name, who runs the corporation because, oh, right? And so that's the way, you know, the guy, what's his name, buying Twitter? Elon Musk, yeah. Well, see, he must know what he's doing. He's got billions and billions of dollars, so if he thinks that must be the way to do business. And so we buy into that, right? It's an issue of authority, and we think that the guy in the white lab coat needs to be trusted. The third method, we call it a priori, or tradition, simply means that to a pragmatist, they believe it because to them it's agreeable to what they've always heard. Well, of course. If the earth is flat, that's what everyone's always said. I'm just going to join the bandwagon. It must work. Make sense? Then the fourth one, science. Science, right, just observes things. They see patterns of nature. They see a cause and effect. And if I can see that, and it seems to be provable, well then I have to trust science. So science is then very pragmatically what makes sense. So to a pragmatist, those are 4 ways, and that's all came from Charles Peirce. Then this William James guy, I'm not even going to get into him because he's an upside down quandary. He published 2 books and they contradicted each other, so please, don't even pay attention to them.
The facts change.
They did. Right? And listen, And it changed to the point where now he said, listen, whatever works is good. And so that's a summary. Having said that, we're going right to our response, because that's what's important. Again, my response when I say this is not how I respond to them, but how I'm thinking in my mind. As I'm listening to someone who's a pragmatist, these are things that I'm thinking, okay? Which, by the way, now let me give you this example. Probably 2 months ago, I had a couple in my office, and I'm talking. And these two had different beliefs. And the guy said, you know what? I think it's great what she believes because it works for her. And I don't have any problem with that. That's good. And it's good for her. But it's not what I believe. And we're good together. We understand each other. All right, now when I heard that, I'm already thinking, oh, he's a pragmatist. Right? Now, as you're listening to that, you might hear cues like that. That's why I say if you're going to be listening to a pragmatist, you're going to hear things like, hey, it's all good. She can believe what she wants to believe, and I can believe what I want to believe. We're just going to, we're going to have this union, and we're going to get along. Right?
Were they married?
No.
Okay.
They were asking me to marry them.
Did you tell them no?
For reasons other than outside their pragmatism. But I will tell you later some questions that I asked because I was listening and I identified him as a pragmatist. But that's the way it finds itself. So as I'm listening to people, this is my first response. The first thing I think when I'm listening to a pragmatist is there is no necessary connection between what works and what is true. I have to start thinking that way. Just because you say it works doesn't mean that it's true. If you want to bat right hand over left, and you believe that you're going to bat better 50 points, if I can prove to you that putting your left hand over your right and then teaching you the rest of the swing, if I teach you not only to put your hands that way, but also affects the way you stand, it also affects the way you look at the ball coming in, if I can teach you all of that, and you can bat 100 points higher, what do you think? So just because, and I have to realize this, there really isn't a necessary connection between what works and what is true. It may be, and here's where we get this, which by the way, I was like, am I white? Is it white? No. Right. Which, by the way, here's another thing. Have you ever heard, if you find a penny, give it to the first person you see. Why? Good luck. What's that?
Find a penny, pick it up all day long and have good luck.
And now, have you ever been perplexed by that? Where you've been like, well, there's a penny. Okay, I better pick it up. Oh, I can't keep it. I better give it to someone. Because you've been led to believe that you don't want bad luck, right? Now, that sounds ridiculous. But it's just as ridiculous with some of the other things that a pragmatist will believe is true just because it works. Or at least it works to them. Right, so here's this, right? By the way, this one is incorrect, this one is correct, and we'll describe it, okay? So, oh, wow. You didn't hear me grunt, did you? All right.
There it was.
I made it. All of this is true, right? And then this is what works inside of what is true. Okay? This is just the opposite. This is what works, and then this is true. Right? Just because it works doesn't mean that it's true. But what is true always works. Does that make sense? that's not correct. Because then this would lead me to believe that there are things that are true that don't work. Are you with me? Yes? Not quite?
Trying to catch up.
Okay, if this is all of truth, then there's only a section of truth that works. There are some truths that don't work. Over here, this is the stuff that we say works, but then truth is within it. What this means, though, then, all of truth works.
Technically, I could prove both of those.
No, you can't.
Sure.
No.
Change the parameters.
What's that?
Change the parameters.
No, you don't change the perimeters. Those are set boundaries.
Parameters.
What, of what?
Anything. For example, if I take an apple and I drop it, will it fall?
Yes.
Unless I'm in space. Parameter has changed.
It'll fall eventually, even if you're in space.
But the truth is, you're now in a sub-0 degree gravity. So it's still true. You're not changing the truth on me, you're adding a truth, which is still true. But now you're in 0 gravity. So not only does an apple not fall, nothing falls. But it slowly falls. So it's still the truth, and it works. No. Truth is never debatable. Because as soon as you say truth is debatable, based on what?
Right. That's the point.
And that's my point. You're not going to change the truth, and I'm not going to let you. Does that make sense?
You've actually clarified the circles by doing that. Clarified it a little more though by doing that.
It was clarified a little more?
By your conversation with him.
Yeah, but that's good. Because see, what we want to do too is allow truth to go out and down and then back up. I mean, well, there's a portion of truth that might not work. And then as Christians, we're always left to hold the question mark. Well, what is it about our faith that doesn't work? And we go, I can't say that all truth works because I get a little uncomfortable. What if someone asks me a question that I can't answer?
That's okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't change the truth. It just means that I might have to research a little more and get back to them, right? Please understand, I can appreciate your question, Matt, because I didn't mean to sound attacking you.
Oh, no. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, because
But I disagree with the way you stated it.
all right, but it doesn't change the truth. All right? And that's where, and a pragmatist will try to change truth, okay? Because it's always subjective, because of what works for me. Are you with me there? Yeah.
Doesn't like the structure of the Christian faith work?
Truth always works.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is like if somebody's just looking for something that works, the Christian faith works. Like it's a very practical, functional, like, you know, God is perfect, we're not, Jesus is, like it's,
right.
This one's got me a little confused because to me it's like, well, if you're a pragmatist, it seems like it's not a real long step to become a Christian because
It's not.
It works.
It's not, and we'll get to that real quick. So let me give you the rest real quick too while we're thinking about it, okay? The second, B, I should say, not second, B underneath response, okay? As I'm thinking about it, there's a basic dilemma, and it's this. Some ideas cannot be judged by their results. Now, we talked about this with evidentialism, right? Just know this, people will say what works has to be true. A lot of false religions are here. And they'll say, well, it works, so it must be true. Boy, you have to be careful with that. That becomes very subjective, because there are some ideas that really can't be judged by the results. Okay? Let me give you this and tell you why. Pragmatism, and I'm sorry, I wrote this down, it's long and lengthy, but you have to fill in the blanks, I think. Pragmatism starts at the end of the process of truth, then works backwards. Okay? If the results, that's the fill in the blank. If the results are desirable, then it validates the truthfulness of the concept. Truth is then subjective and dependent on the one making the judgment. Problem with that is then man creates truth as it suits him or as it is reasonable to him. Does that make sense? Pragmatism starts at the end and says, well, listen, here's the results. It works. It must be true. Okay, but wait a minute. It satisfied what I believe I wanted to see. And isn't that true sometimes? We're going to say, but wait a minute. I'm batting this way and I'm showing you it works. I get a base hit 1 out of 3 times, I'm in the major leagues. But if I can show biomechanically, it makes more sense to do this. And then it makes sense that if you step and do all this other, oh, wait, I can bat 350. But see, I'm happy batting 300. I can validate what I say is true based on the results. Are you with me there? So it becomes very subjective.
Is that like when you get the right answer on a math problem in high school, even though you did it completely wrong? Like you didn't do the equation right in any way, shape, or form, but somehow you still got to the right answer.
Or, see, and here's to a pragmatist. Listen, I'll give you the participation certificate because at least you participated. It's not about what is right or what is wrong. It's about what I think is right or wrong. Because to a pragmatist, right, it's about the result. And usually it's a result that I wanted to see anyway. See, that's why there are people looking for the gauging. And they're, oh, it's true, there's a gauging. No, there's not. But listen, that's what they want to find. And because they want to find it, when they hear someone who's going to say, if I'm a scientist with a white lab coat, we have evidence that there may be a gauging, they're going to quote me all over the newspaper. Does that make sense? Because they wanted me to prove and validate what they wanted to hear as a result.
That's one of the biggest problems in science. They know what they strive to prove what they want the outcome to be.
And that's number 2 underneath basic dilemma. Pragmatism helps me achieve the results only if I already know the results that I seek. See, if I already have an idea of what I want them to prove, well then all I have to do is listen to what you're saying that proves what I want you to prove. And that's what a pragmatist does, because they start at the end and then work their way backward. Okay? C. Pragmatism gives no guidance for ultimate or absolute truth. That guy that I told you I was talking to, he was a pragmatist. I said, so can I ask you a question? He goes, sure. Now, I was getting to the idea of absolute truth. I said, so, you're saying whatever is good for you is good for you, whatever is good for her is good for her. Yeah. Okay. So whatever's good for me is good for me? Sure. Okay. I know that you were previously married and you have an ex-wife and you have a child. Let's say that you're currently married and you have a wife and a child. If I say it's okay for me and it's good for me to show up tonight at your house and shoot and kill your wife and child, is that okay? Because I'm telling you, it's good for me. He goes, no, it's not good. Wait a minute, you just said that whatever I believe is good for me. I believe it's good for me to show up at your house tonight and murder your wife and your child. I don't have a problem with that. He didn't know how to answer that. So then I asked, so is it possible that what we all need to believe is something that is based on absolutely what is true, not just on how I feel about it or what you perceive it as? He didn't answer my question, did this. He goes, I'll have to think about that. I said, good, please do. See, I put a pebble in his shoe. Let me get to these 4 questions, and I'm just going to lay them off real quick. You can write them down.
1 and 2 under C.
1 or 2 under what?
1 and 2 under C.
Oh, 1, pragmatism does not believe in absolute truth. Because it's just about what works. 2, a pragmatist may combine experientialism and fideism. Because it's whatever their experience is, whatever they believe. So it's a combination of those 2. All right? Here's the 4 questions. A, aren't there things that quote-unquote work that are not true? Here's one of them. You can give an example. Spinach does not make you stronger. Popeye was dead wrong. Okay? Now listen, there's iron in spinach, and that helps you, but it doesn't make you stronger. Wouldn't it be great if we all ate spinach and just... that was it. 2, or B, sorry. What if what works for you does not work for me? Or you can ask that question vice versa. What if what works for me doesn't work for you? And then this obviously has to be the follow-up question. Well, then who is right? Who is right? C, can we ever know what is true if you and I never agree? Follow-up question, is there then absolute truth? Now, just in case you get an extreme pragmatist, I put D, this is the last question, because then they might come back and say, well listen, all these people believe it to be true, right? The question is then, does truth depend on how many people believe something to be true? Can something be true is another way to ask this. Can something be true even if just one person believes it? Because an extreme pragmatist will just be good at quoting all these people and will see the masses believe this. Okay, wait. Can the masses be deceived? All right. Any questions, comments about any of that? All right, listen, you get a week off. You don't have to do this again. But know this, next Sunday I'm going to ask you to do another one of these because we're going to cover some more, but I'm also going to give you a twist. Okay? So no homework this week. You got to highlight these. Any comments or questions before I close?